I had this friend in high school, Steve, who was deathly afraid of spiders. Arachnophobia, I guess the term is. I knew from the very beginning of our friendship that he had issues with them, but as I got to know him better, the extent of his fears truly puzzled me. Even the tiniest, unassuming little 8-legged bugger would instill in him a paralyzing fear that would leave him in a state of senseless shock. We teased him about it, of course. That's what friends are for. Catch a little one and dangle it in front of him. Well, I did it anyway. The others also seemed to have some hidden reservations against the cuddly crawlies. In an attempt to diagnose his phobia, I shared with him a theory I'd read somewhere. Apparently, some scientists, or psychologists I guess, believe that the reason so many of us have arachnophobia is because inside of the womb, I guess the tissue and muscle kind of resembles a spider, and that the last image we see before we are violently pulled out of the warmth and care of our only known home, naked and defenseless into a cold and brutal world, is the vague, pulsating image of a spider. He dismissed this idea quite rudely. He told me he knew exactly why he hated spiders so much. He was 5 years old, he told me, hiking through the woods with his parents. At some point, he got away from them and, in a panic, he just started running. He must have tripped over a branch and ended up face down on the ground. Only it wasn't on the ground, he was face down in a papery cocoon. A spider egg sac. Thousands of spiders burst from the eggs and crawled over his face, into his mouth, down his clothes, and he could do nothing about it. He was stuck, you see. His foot was tangled in the branch, so he just lay there with the tiny baby spiders crawling all over him, until his parents heard his blood-curdling screams and came to his aid. I had to admit, as far as reasons for hating spiders go, this particular one was pretty solid. I tried a few different approaches in my attempts to cure his fear, like suggesting that on average, only 6.6 people die from venomous spider bites each year, and that bees and wasps will kill 8 times as many, or the fact that out of over 43,000 known species of spiders, only 30 or so have been responsible for human death, or that it isn't true that you on average swallow 8 spiders in your sleep in a year. Believe me, I know spiders. They wouldn't voluntarily come anywhere near your nauseating breath hole. But it didn't help. His phobia was rooted in trauma. Facts couldn't change that. Maybe a more direct approach would do the trick, I thought. I'd heard about it before. Just subject the person to whatever they're afraid of. Force it on them. Make them accept that it is but a silly notion based on illogical fallacies. So, I collected a jar of assorted garden variety spiders. You know, small, unimposing, harmless ones. Not too hairy, not too spindly. I carried a jar with me for days, just waiting for the right moment, the perfect opportunity. I decided I'd do it in a controlled environment, somewhere he couldn't escape from, so I did it after gym class, just when he was getting out of the shower. I snuck up behind him, popped open the jar, and shook it like crazy over his head. He didn't talk to me for a month. Despite my good intentions, the plan backfired ever so slightly. Realizing there were a dozen of spiders or so crawling all over him, he completely freaked out. Long story short, he lost his footing on the slippery wet floor, and broke his back in 3 different places. He was hospitalized for a month where he completely ignored me. Maybe it was for the best, I thought. I mean, could I even entertain the idea of having a friend who hated spiders? Disliked them? Sure. Loathed them? I could understand that. But hate? That's such a powerful negative emotion. But, to my surprise, he called me up the day he got out of the hospital. He said he was sorry, that he may have overreacted, and that all he wanted was to hang out. Maybe it had worked after all? Maybe he didn't hate spiders anymore? I had my doubts, but I figured I'd give it a shot at least. I asked him if he wanted to spend the night at my place. My mother was having one of her weeks and I could really use the company. It was the first time I'd invited him over. First time I'd invited anyone over, come to think of it. So, I was pretty stoked when he said yes. I didn't bother asking my mom. I knew what the answer was anyway. It was definitely better if she didn't know. Steve came around after school, bringing a bottle of vodka and some beers. He seemed to be in good spirits, all things considered, and we spent the night drinking, listening to music and playing games. You know, just chilling. I told him about the basement, that we couldn't go down there because of Mom, and even though I could clearly see he found it strange, he just shrugged and gave me a casual sure, whatever. I must have passed out around midnight, too much vodka I guess. I really couldn't hold my liquor during Instar. Steve slept me awake a couple of hours later. I came to slowly, confused and still pretty dizzy from the alcohol. He stood over me smiling, holding what appeared to be a hunter's knife. "Did you really think I was just gonna let it go?" He snarled through gritted teeth. A sudden rush of realization hit me, and I desperately struggled to get on my feet. Only I couldn't move at all. "Don't bother. I've tied you up nice and tight. Doesn't feel so good, does it, when someone else takes control?" I attempted to talk some sense into him, but the sounds came out all muffled. I could only lay there, helpless, as he brought the knife down an inch from my eye, the fear at that point all-consuming. "Don't worry," he grinned. "I'm not gonna kill you. Just, scar you for life." I stared at him wide-eyed, tears streaming down my face. "If you just hadn't gagged me, you might still be alive, Steve. I could have warned you about my mother. Her harrowing shadow descending on you from the ceiling. She doesn't like it when people threaten her children. She doesn't like when she's disturbed during her sleepy week. I could have talked her out of it, bridged the gap between our people. But you always hated us, didn't you? Even at the end, I could see it in your eyes. As my mother consumed you, I could tell by your screams that you still couldn't accept us, that you wanted nothing but to harm us. I guess, when push come to shove, it was for the best. I truly cannot stomach bigotry.